So, Tim, welcome, welcome, welcome to our Leadership Summit. And today we're going to be talking about transforming the education field using leadership development. And
Mm.
before we begin, tell us a little bit about yourself, because I know that our listeners are going to be wondering why I asked you to speak today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. Well, firstly, thank you for having me. It's a real honor to be here. So, a little bit about me. So, I'm English. You might be able to tell that from my accent. I live in the north of England, but I'm from the south. I currently have a puppy, as you might be able to hear. So, hopefully, she'll quieten down soon. So, apologies if that's a bit irritating. Professionally, I am a vocalist. So, I work with voice in all ways, shapes, and forms. So, I am myself a singer and a speaker. And then I work with people to train them in their own singing voice, their own speaking voice. I work with schools, going in and doing whole class or whole school singing. I work with teachers to teach them how to teach. And also I work with profoundly disabled children, so children with PMLD, profound and multiple learning disabilities, with a brand new instrument called resonant tails, which extends their vocal expressivity. Which is just amazing, obscure, wonderful, unique work. And that takes me all over the country at the moment. And then I also do audio acting, voice acting, audio narration, which is how we got in touch with my story of the boy, the mole, the fox, and the horse, my reading of the story. It's not my story, and other little voice things like that. So all things voice really is why I'm here.
So that's where I want to pick things up because take us back to how did you either choose or were asked to do the narration for the fantastic book? And for those of you who are just joining us, you can go back and check the replay that Tim has allowed us to actually preview that right before our interview. So you got to hear him actually doing the narration for The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse. How did that project even come about?
So for those who don't know, I've got it here. The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse is by an English artist called Charlie Mackesy. And he basically did lots of one-offs, little pictures with these four characters, the boy, the mole, the fox, and the horse, and then wrote these little life lessons around them. And he'd written so many, he decided to collate them into a book. And it kind of just went wild across the UK. And obviously, we've all been in COVID and lockdown, and life's been really tough. And so a lot of people held on to this book and the lessons in it as a real lifeline. And they're also huge lessons in leadership and in personal family life for grown-ups and for not so grown-ups and for very grown-ups as well. And it came about because my sister was running, she works in education, and she was running a leadership program for her staff. And they were basing it on the lessons that can be taken from this book. And she said, well, we could read it ourselves, but Tim, would you mind reading it, doing a little video for us, making it look and sound pretty, and then we can share it, and then we can ask questions. And I did. And then I thought, I'm going to get in touch with the author and see if I can actually produce this and get it out there properly. And thankfully, Charlie got back and said, yes, you can. Always get copyright permissions, people. And so I was able to then produce it properly, and I voiced it all, and then I wrote the music underneath it as well, based on the truths and the lines in it.
And oh my gosh, and the reason I found it was again through educators. A great friend and colleague of mine was reading it for part of their literacy course, and she sent me the link and said, "Oh, this is a great narration," and it made me think of you. And I went up and I heard it, and I was like, "Oh my gosh!" One thing, the book is incredible, right? The lessons were incredible,
Mm.
and your narration of it. I'm not even saying that right. Your narration of it was incredible. It just brought the book alive. It made the characters so real and personable that I instantly said, "Oh, I've got to reach out to him and see if he would be one of our speakers." And lo and behold, that's how we got here today.
Mm.
And so I'm going to use that into a bridge to talk about leadership because, again, it's not only the book which brought us together, but also just the fact that you're a voice coach, among other things. And when we first started talking about it and getting to know each other, I know I had said to you that I really see the voices being really important for leadership,
Mm,
right? So that when we own our voice, what does that look like? Or when our voice gets validated. And that's where I saw this huge connection with the work that you do, because as a voice coach and all of your different iterations, my perception is that's what you get to do. You go in and you help people find, strengthen, nurture their own voice, as well as
mm.
validating it. So, can you share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I think sort of in terms of the leadership for me, I want to. You mentioned the word authentic right at the beginning, and I think authentic leadership is so important. I think you've just got to be you. Whether when I walk into a space, whether that's a classroom or a workshop space or a stage or a voice studio, I can only be me. Whatever leadership style I've chosen to adopt for that particular environment, I can only do that through this conduit, through being me. And so, as you say, to be able to enable others to do the same thing, they can only be them. And so they need to find their authentic leadership style as well. And when it comes to voice, when I'm in a space, I know what my voice needs. I know how I need to prepare for the space. I know what kind of projection I need. I know mic technique. When I teach, my voice goes all over the place in pitch, in tone, in quality, in speed, for effect, and knowing how to do that. And I'm always ready for it. And so then what I do is I help others find their voice, as you said, but also to find presence in their space, whether that's a classroom or a stage or an assembly hall or a really intimate group of 2 to 3 children. And I think it's so important that the voice is one of our leading communication tools. It's not our only communication tool, but it's one of our leading ones. And I think it's so important to understand your voice, to know your voice, and then to know how to use it most efficiently.
Wow. Okay. So I'm going to put you on the spot.
Okay, okay.
So that's my forewarning, because I want to ask you, and I know you said you've gone in and you've worked with teachers, and what would be a tip that you could give us within education to even be comfortable with our voice or to find our voice?
Mm, so many. The biggest tip, I think, I'm gonna stick with projection,
Okay.
because projection's quite a simple one, but also can be a challenging one. So when we think about
Mm,
projecting our voice, our voice is the only thing that comes from us through the air to other people. So it's a really
mhm.
important tool. Leaves my mouth, travels the air, goes into your ears, and gets turned through electricity into sound that you can comprehend and then respond to. So with projection, it's so easy at the front of a class to maybe lower your voice. Can you hear me okay? No, you can't at the back. Or maybe go a bit over the top, and then actually you're just in this position all the time, and then you're going to strain your voice, and then you leave the day and you're exhausted and you're vocally exhausted. And then if you decide to go for a couple of drinks with some friends afterwards, and you're then in this heightened state again, you're not going to last the week. So I think the tip for me is to know your space. So when you're speaking for you, that's kind of here. And then what energy and what volume do you need to then fill the room? So it's still not huge, but filling the room. And then imagine that room is an auditorium. What kind of space do you need there? And you're never shouting, you're just projecting. And my favorite way to do this is to call for my mum. And I mean that when you're a kid and your mum's in the other room and you go, Mum, you have a natural calling voice. That doesn't go away. So that when you're at the front of the class, obviously don't shout for your mum when you're at the front of the class. But imagine that in your head. Mum, okay, today we're going to be thinking about this. Mum, those at the back, can you hear? Are you brilliant? And that call voice, knowing the space of the room, is really good for that proper projection.
So I love this. And gosh, there's so many different places I can go with this, because last year's summit was around working with teaching teams. And a lot of things that I do with them, or one of the things that I do with them, is around even working with children with challenging behaviors. And one of the things that stood out for me was when you talked about being in the classroom and not only projecting out, and I love your tip, right? You know, using your calling voice, but also when you said to talk for effect. So a lot of times when a child is in distress, one of the things we want to do that we encourage them to do is to actually start where the child is. So if the child's very loud, you start with them very loud, and then slowly quiet your voice for over time to help them bring it down and re-regulate. So I think that's a great way to show the power of the voice, and in your work within the classroom or in other places. And so from there, I actually want to make this huge giant leap over to leadership.
Mm,
So how do we use our voice as a way to either demonstrate our leadership or to really, gosh, show up in our leadership, or as you said it, in our authenticity?
mm. Yeah, that's a really, really good question. And with voice, it's quite tricky because every voice is different. But perhaps that's a really good strength because when I go to a class or to a teaching hall or I'm teaching teachers how to teach, they say, yeah, but I can't do it like you. And I say, I don't want you to do it like me. I want you to do it like you. So you kind of throw it back at them. And so for me, I want to inspire, not not clone. I don't want clones of me. That would be awful. I want to inspire someone else. And actually, for leadership is also about, you've got to find different paths for the same solution. And so there are some times when I'm teaching and I need to know 5 or 6 different methods to get to the same outcome because someone is very, very receptive to feel. You'll feel it here, here, and here. Oh yeah, I've got it. Another person, none of that, but they can hear it. When they hear it, they get it. Another person, it needs to be cognitively locked in before they even think about applying it. So with your leadership and your voice, it's being really sensitive to the people you're talking to. Voice, we could go on for years on this, but voice is very personal. And so to say to someone that they're using their voice wrong can have real catastrophic effects. It's also being really gentle and really sensitive with somebody. And for me, I also love modeling. And I think this is a really important part of leadership as well, modeling getting it wrong. I think we live in a world where unless it's perfect, there's no point doing it. You can't, unless you're Instagram perfect or TED Talk perfect, what's the point? Get out. And that's so dangerous. It's so dangerous because if we're not TED Talk ready, or if we're not television ready, then we're rubbish. Then we're nothing, not even going to try. And so I try and model getting things wrong. I take people with me of going, you know what? I don't care what sound comes out of your face. Let's go. Because if I can hear a mistake, I can correct it. And I think it's allowing people to get things wrong. And obviously, in a leader, you want them to be, to have as few mistakes as possible. Sure, you want them to be trustworthy and all of that stuff. But actually, there's something about having a vulnerable leader and a leader that accepts when things have gone wrong and accepts when they take responsibility for something that hasn't gone well. And to, even in the little workshops, to practice getting things wrong, I think is really, really important.
Okay, so I'm sitting over here writing furiously because you said so many great points. So I'm going to see how many we can get through
Mhm.
before our time is up, because we might have to come back and do a part two.
I'm ready. I'm there.
So one of the things that I heard you say and I wrote down was being stepping into authentic leadership, right? And then you followed it up with your goal is to really inspire people, not to clone people. And
Mm,
this to me is such a brilliant point, because when we talk about leadership, we are talking about stepping into who you are, showing up in who you are, or I heard it wonderfully one time, in who you be. Right?
mm,
It's the being of you. And for so many of us, we've covered it up with so many layers in terms of what our family thinks we should be, or our culture, our society, or our profession. And it might be an uncovering of that to really get back to who we be, right? Who are
Mm,
we as an individual? So, again, I really appreciate that point because when you talk about going in and saying to your group, I want you to have your voice, showcase your voice. And at the beginning, it might be giving them permission, which for some of them may never have had, or for
mm,
many of us, myself included, need to remember. And then after a while, it's we no longer need permission. We're totally comfortable
mm.
with our voice. So again, I just love that point because our voice is critical to our leadership.
Yeah.
Critical. Okay, and then what else you talked about is having an understanding about how your, and I wrote down, how your voice and your words land on
Mm,
people. And meaning, who is your audience? What is your intention? So being really clear about that, knowing that, of course, they're going to be lives, right?
yep.
Where, organic situations, but ultimately understanding that what is my message? Who do I want to get it across to? How does my voice, my presence, my
Mm,
leadership need to show up or get to show up so that it lands or impacts with the best of intentions?
yeah.
Because I think a lot of us, and again, myself included, don't always pay attention, and then we end up in apology, right?
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
Or cleaning up messes because we have to go back and gain clarity around
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
So I love that. And then the other thing that I heard was, oh, that I absolutely loved was modeling the wrong way.
Yeah.
And you hit on such an incredible point around the fact that, again, especially bombarded by media 24/7 in all kinds of forms, we get to see people's what I call their highlight reels, right? Even on Facebook or Instagram, that's usually them at their best. And so we walk away with this idea of what we think we should sound like, which isn't necessarily, the way things really are. And giving people, again, permission to show up, but also to fail, knowing that we learn from our mistakes.
Yeah.
So that seems to have gotten lost along the way. And I know in many professions, and certainly in education, we have this fear of failure because it leaves many of us with a sense of, oh, well, I might be perceived as incompetent.
Yeah. I really wonder where the fear of failure starts. Because as children, you're taught to fail. You're taught to get it wrong. Have a go. It doesn't matter. If you get it wrong, just try again. And then as adults, we're scared of it. So I really wonder at what age
Ah,
the switch happens.
so Tim, you know what? I have to say that I've heard quite often, and I've had experiences where it's not okay to fail. Why did you get this?
Ah,
Why didn't you get 100% or 90%? Why aren't you
ah,
getting those A's? Right? That speaks to
mm,
perfectionism. And I can tell you within the field of education, that is our makeup.
yeah,
If you ask many educators, they will tell you they are perfectionists
yeah,
because they are about achieving the most or being perfect.
yeah,
That does not include failure.
yeah. I think it was Tony Robbins who said perfection is the lowest possible standard because it is simply unattainable.
Yes.
So don't go for
Yes.
perfection, go for your best.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
We say the same thing. We're not expecting perfection. We're expecting excellence.
Yeah.
There's a difference.
Yeah.
There's a difference there. And the ability to, like you said, fail, what we call fail forward, meaning we know we're going to make the mistakes. The idea is to use those mistakes as data to give us information about what we might want to go back and tweak or change or delete or do more of.
Yep.
So Having said that, in our previous conversation, we talked about your work with the children, and I can't remember how you said that. They were profoundly
Profound and multiple learning disability.
okay. And so when you work with them, and you gave me this incredible demonstration of how you actually work with them in their leadership, right? In
Mm-hmm.
discovering and validating their authentic voice. Can you share that with us again? Because that was just such an incredible aha for me.
Yeah, of course, of course. So this work is with a machine called Resonant Tails. That's the machine, and it's a multisensory voice echo machine. And what we do is we go in with these children who are predominantly non-verbal, so they can make sounds, but they don't speak. And we help enhance an already established practice, which is intensive interaction, so very intense mimicry. And so we work with these children. And what I do is I go through the palette of my voice, high sounds, funny sounds, silly sounds, rude sounds, low sounds, to see what they like. And then when I get a response, I then add that into my vocality. So for example, if I'm going and they go, I'll then go and I'll try and copy their sound as accurately as possible. So I'm not teaching them, they are teaching me. So I am taking on their language. So that's a really nice example of a little laugh. Some of them have already got their voice and they know the sounds that they like. So you'll have a child come in to see you and they go, ah. Now, if I turn around and went, ah, that's not really validating their voice because that's putting my spin on it. Or if a child goes, ah, and you go, la, 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 la. Again, it's not validating their voice. So our job is to mimic almost as accurately as we can, to go, ah. And after a while, they understand this. And there's a moment they look at you and they go, you're doing what I'm doing. You're listening to me. And not only that, you're responding to me, you're validating me, and you seem to be enjoying it, rather than being told to be quiet or whatever, or apologizing for their voice. And then the beautiful moment comes where they then start extending that voice. So they've given us the language, and then we start playing with it. So they, for example, have gone, oh. So we might then go, oh. So we extend it, make it a bit longer. I wonder what their lung capacity is like. And then they start extending their voice a little bit more. Then they go a bit higher and a bit lower. And then you bring the machine in, and the machine starts echoing or putting silly effects on it or raising the pitch or that kind of thing. And I've seen children conduct themselves. And so they're with this machine and they run over to the microphone and they go, and this sound that comes out, because it's all with the effects. And they look at me and they get so excited and they run me over. Can you change the effects again? Because they don't say that, but their body language is so excited because they are in control of their voice. We help facilitate it to start, and then they can start duetting with themselves with this machine, Resonant Tails. It's just incredible, incredible work.
And I can tell because once again, and it happened the first time we talked, right? I got goosebumps or chicken skin, depending on where you are in the world. And again, I know people are like, okay, well, Deidre, what does this have to do with leadership? And for me, it has everything to do with leadership. It's just your example shows what it looks like with this population of young children. And when we as adults step into our leadership, one of the things that we get to do is we get to embrace and encourage and nurture others in their leadership. And so the word that I use a lot to describe what you're doing is mirroring. And so when we go in and we work with other adults, they'll do something. And what I get to do is unpack that. Literally, they might be doing a lesson and I'll unpack, well, here are all the strategies that you did. It was a mirroring back to them what they do. And literally, I just did this last week. And the person who I did that with lit up and said, oh, oh my gosh, you made me sound so smart was what she
Okay.
did. And so I got to validate, well, you are smart. All I did was just mirror back to you what you had done. and to help you see it. Because that's one of the things we also know is that for many of us, we tend to be unconsciously competent,
Mm.
meaning especially as educators, we educate through tuition. And the idea is to become consciously competent so that we educate through intention. And so we get to know what we're doing so we can be more intentional about when we do it, how we do it, who we do it with, where we do it,
Mm.
which takes us full circle back to you at the beginning saying, when you go in, how do you want to use your voice? What is the space? What is the audience? So there's direct correlation between the two. And so one of the things that I love about the leadership work is that leaders can be anywhere and everywhere. They're not just for administration or administrators or directors or principals or superintendents, which is where our work tends to lie when we think about leadership, but at all levels within the education field, regardless of what your role is. And so as we start to wrap up, here is my last question for you. How does leadership show up for you, both personally and professionally?
I think it's that it goes back to that empowering, allowing people to get things wrong. And I think for me, there's a really lovely quote by Theodore Roosevelt, which is, "Comparison is the thief of joy." Comparison is the thief of joy. And I
Mhm.
think for me, with everything that I've said already, I don't want to repeat myself because a lot of what I've already said is how it appears for me. But comparison is the thief of joy. I am not 30 years down the line with 30 years more experience. I am not that person over there with that amount of experience. I am me with my warts and all, my shortcomings, my strengths, my experience, my voice. And I think it's so important, like with getting things wrong, like with modeling, inspiring, not cloning, actually comparison is the thief of joy. If I compare myself to people, sure, I can use them as inspiration. Yeah, great. I want to be inspired. I want to inspire someone else. I can be inspired too. But I don't want to look at someone and go, well, I could never do that, so I'm not going to bother. Because I'd hate it if someone looked at me and did that. So I think comparison is the thief of joy is my sort of big takeaway, I suppose, my big ethos that runs through of, you know what, that person's got 30 years more experience. Where might I be in 30 years? Let them inspire me so that when I'm 30 years on, I could have achieved.
Awesome. Thank you. And so we're starting to wrap up, and I want to let people know, how can they get in touch with you and find out more about the work that you do?
Fabulous, thank you. So go to my website, timuffindell.co.uk. I'm sure there'll be links and all exciting things. And from there, if you want to, you can sign up to the newsletter. And I'm going to be giving away 7 top tips for sort of getting ready for vocal readiness, from like warm-ups, projection, protecting your voice and all of that kind of thing. And I'm also on social media, Tim Uffindell on Instagram as well.
Love it. Tim, thank you, thank you, thank you so much for coming on board. Thank your puppy, because really well behaved,
He did well,
And
yeah.
I know for those of you who are listening, you can probably hear my husband in the background, so I know what it's like to share space with our creatures and our people. So again, this was so wonderful. I really appreciate it. And I also appreciate you giving us permission to actually showcase that narration beforehand. Everyone's going to have so much fun as they listen to it again. So thank you. I appreciate it, and have a wonderful, wonderful evening.
Thank you so much. See you soon.